Did you get some value from this? That's great. That's great. That's my dad and his case manager, Kim. That's my dad. He's 90. Also a Ravens fan. You can tell he's good. And my dad was one of 4 boys. He was the third in line. He's the only brother left. My grandfather had a delicatessen back in Baltimore about 75, 80, maybe probably 100 years ago by now. But he raised 4 boys that all turned out to be drummers. They learned how to play drums on the pots and pans in the kitchen of that delicatessen. And they all grew up to be either professional or semi-professional musicians and comedians and entertainers. Like I said, my dad gets it from me. No, the matzo ball doesn't roll far from the bowl, as I like to say. And I've had such an extraordinary and amazing, and this is a lot about what I'm writing about in the book, which has 1 or 2 working titles. The other title to the book may be "You're Never Going to Believe This," and it's really my experience as a case manager, as a caretaker, of my family. After my sister passed from breast cancer back in 2000, my father had stopped eating. He stopped showering. He stopped dressing. That was the beginning of the end for him. He couldn't resolve that he had lost his little girl. That's grief turned inward, manifesting as severe and deep depression, right? My parents at the time were living in Baltimore. I was living in California. I could not take care of them, so I moved them lock, stock, and barrel in a day and a half, 27 boxes at UPS, brought my mother, my dad, and their cat, Quetzal, across the United States, moved them into a new condo. I said, "Ma, how do you like it?" She goes, "It could be better." And my father's walking in there kind of like a zombie. He was so depressed. He goes, "When are we going home?" And my mother goes, "Melvin, we're not going home. We moved here." He didn't even know, right? But they couldn't enjoy their life in California because he was so depressed. And so we took him to psychologists, we took him to psychiatrists, and finally, and throughout that time, my father was having these mystery pains. They were manifesting. He'd point to his teeth. And so we took him to the dentist. The dentist says, "There's nothing wrong with your father." And then he pointed to this tooth. He says, "Don't waste your money. There's nothing wrong." And then he pointed here. He goes, "You're never going to believe this. Now it's in my penis." My mother goes, "Melvin, the pain is not in your penis. It's in your head." And I'm standing there. If it wasn't tragic, it would have been hilarious, right? I'm actually listening to this conversation. Well, finally, I know, right? You're never going to believe this. We take my father to a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist says, "Well, ECT, electroconvulsive therapy." He says, "How many of you are familiar with that?" He says, "I'm not going to do that. It's going to turn me into a vegetable." My mother says, "Melvin, you already are a vegetable. You're doing it." And my father's getting ready for the ECT, and it's mild sedation. The patient doesn't even know. I mean, they don't. What it does is it induces mild seizure, and somehow the seizure sort of reboots the brain and has a very positive effect that people that suffer from epilepsy have the seizures, and there's a correlation between no depression and epileptics. So they sort of figure this out, right? So we don't know if this is going to work, and my dad was like, he's not the guy you see there. He was totally upside down frown. I mean, he was, he said to me, "Take care of your mother when I die." So we go to the hospital the next day after he has his first treatment. My wife, my mother, and I walk in, and we look in the dining room, and I don't see him. My wife sees him, and there's this man over there going. And we walk over there, we sit with him, and he goes, "How are you guys? What's going on? What'd you have for lunch? What?" And we're crying, right? We got my dad back. It was an amazing transformation. It was such an amazing transformation. I used to joke with my mother. I go, "Mom, maybe we should drop a toaster in the bathtub for you." "Hey, how are ya? Nice to see you. Where have I been? I don't know. Good to see you." I know, Ma. I tell that joke. I love you. But